I think I've had a slight change in my mentality over the last few weeks, specifically for this brand new MacBook Air with M3. I've been using this every day for like 95% of my work and personal tasks, and I still believe that this is the laptop that I would probably recommend for everyone that asks me. But now, I think things get a little deeper because I've realized that your very basic laptop users can not only get away with 8 gigs, yes, 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of SSD storage on the latest MacBook Air, but they probably don't even need the latest MacBook Air. The M2 is more than adequate, and honestly, even the cheaper M1 is probably just fine. If you're someone who just needs a home computer to occasionally check your personal finances, maybe you're booking a trip, you got to write out longer emails, you don't want to use your phone, you want to print out some documents, you want to use a printer. People still use printers. I think about my in-laws a lot in this situation. They have an older Intel MacBook Air, and I recently went up to set up a new printer for them and realized that they've been using this machine for quite a few years now and have never once complained about it. They use it for very specific tasks, and it's more than enough for them. Now, when that computer inevitably becomes unusable, and let's say that happens right now, I would point them in the direction of any Apple Silicon MacBook Air. The cheapest model. I know. I've been saying, again, 256 gigs of storage, that's crazy. 8 gigs of RAM, that's just not enough. But I finally have realized that people who are like my in-laws absolutely, truly do not care. So you can get the M1 MacBook Air at a great option, like for $699, even as little as $649, depending on where you buy it. And if they just want a new display and better design, and they just want something new for the sake of it being new, or maybe a 15-inch model, then the M2s are probably just fine for them. Now, that's not a knock on the M3. The M3 has its place for sure. It's perfect for someone who has an M1 already and they want a little bit more juice out of their laptop and doesn't need a MacBook Pro, or someone who wants to get the latest and greatest machine that makes sense for them and keep it for a very long time. I just usually like to recommend going with the latest generation just so you have a little bit more padding, just a little bit more future-proofing there. Now, for those who need a bit more power and performance, and I'm not talking about those who want an M3 Pro, M3 Max, or Mac Studio with the Ultra chip, you guys are probably not going to even bother with this video, but for those who are up and coming designers, creators, you like to play games on your Mac. Yes, people do game on their Mac, and whatever those games might be, if you want to make sure performance isn't going to be an issue, well, it's wild for me to admit this, but I think I can do nearly 100% of my job on this 15-inch MacBook Air, the M3 model that I've been using for the last few weeks. But before we get into my overall experience with this new Air, I want to give you more information about today's sponsor, Keeper. Ever wish you could just get rid of passwords forever? Don't we all? Luckily, passkeys are here and they're bringing us one step closer to a passwordless future. Keeper Security, the password manager that I use, and again, the sponsor of today's video, now supports passkeys on iPhone and Android. Keeper also supports passkeys with their browser extension, which means with Keeper, you can create and use both passwords and passkeys across all of your devices. Passkeys lets you log into apps and accounts the same way that you log into your phone with your fingerprint or facial recognition. And it's all super secure. They're phishing resistant and support two-factor authentication by design. It's actually wild to me that in 2024, people don't use a password manager. I feel like we need to be better than that. And we need to be safer online as more and more of your personal data is stored in these computers and these devices, and it's just all out there for anyone to potentially take from you. And so I've gotten all of my friends and family to use Keeper to manage their passwords, so what's stopping you? And Keeper is actually offering a special deal for our MacRumors readers and viewers, and you can get 50% off with code MacRumors50, or you can give it a test run with a free 30-day trial, and all you have to do is click the link in the description down below. Thanks, Keeper, for sponsoring this video. Okay, so I've been editing just about all of my latest videos and episodes of the podcast on this M3 MacBook Air. This is the 15-inch model in silver, and it's been perfectly fine. I've traveled with it, loved it, super light, fits in my backpack, no problem there. And it's not nearly as heavy as my M3 MacBook Max, my M3 MacBook Pro with the Max chip. And I'm not saying that this laptop is better than that by any means, but I guess I just don't really need it. And when you fall into this category of someone who thinks that they might need a lot more power, but ultimately don't need that and you don't want to spend that kind of money, I really invite you to give the MacBook Air a try. Even though it might have a stigma to it, I promise you, I think you won't be disappointed. I do still think there are some upgrades in order, like RAM and memory. For me personally, and since Apple Silicon ties all of that together in one chip, you can't make changes later. So you best be sure that you get what you need so that you don't have any issues when it comes time to it. So 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of SSD storage is what I have on this model. And I think I could upgrade maybe the storage a little bit more, but I've been totally good with 16 gigs of RAM. My only frustrations come from the lack of ports compared to my MacBook Pro, and that's really it. Everything else I can pretty much live without. Again, the storage is a little low, but you can always get an external SSD if you need to. I think the display has been perfectly fine and reasonable for what I need to do. You can use 2 external Apple Studio displays if you want to natively, but you have to have that lid closed. And the webcam audio and video looks and sounds great for the most part. So I can take those video calls whenever I need to and not have to worry about my quality being an issue for others on the call. It's honestly a great all-around laptop, but if you can find cheaper and slightly older options that fit your needs better, by all means, absolutely go for it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Apple Silicon is so good these days with the advancements. Each and every year just might not be necessary for most of you out there. And again, you're probably yelling at me and been saying this for so long. Dan, we know this already. It's just taken me a while to realize that I really just don't need a lot of that stuff out there. Now, of course, there are times where it does come in handy. There are going to be times where you will push your device to the limits and you're going to be wishing that maybe you had something a little bit more powerful. And if you are in a situation where you can afford to get something more powerful and you think you might run into those more than you might want to, then definitely feel free to upgrade by all means. But if you're someone who's like, I just want to be able to get started in that line of work where I might be pushing my laptop to the fullest, you can get an M3 MacBook Air. I have the 15-inch model. The 13 is more than enough. It's all going to be the same. It's just preference on your screen size, and I think you'll be just fine. One other thing I do want to touch on, I did have the 13-inch MacBook Air, not as long as the 15-inch. I don't have that one anymore, but I did want to update you on the anodization of the whole midnight coating that you have on there. I don't think the fingerprints are fully solved, but it's definitely a little bit better than the previous model where Fingerprint City was the name of that game. But yeah, I think you will still have fingerprints and it's still going to look kind of grimy and gross at times. I think the silver is a good option. I like Starlight, but Midnight is the best looking color. But again, at the end of the day, you might be frustrated with those fingerprints. So I just wanted to put that out there in case you were thinking about getting that model. So again, this is the 8-core CPU, 10-core GPU, 15-inch MacBook Air with M3 that has 16 gigs of RAM, which I think is probably just enough for everyone out there who is looking to upgrade a little bit. I don't think you need to go to 24. If you do, then by all means, go for it. 512 SSD storage. I might bump that up to a terabyte and get an external drive if you're really storing a lot of huge files. Otherwise, so far in the 3 weeks that I've been using this machine, I have not run out of storage. So obviously, it's probably good for most people out there. But yeah, it starts at $16.99. You can get the 13-inch model for a little bit cheaper if you don't want that bigger display. But yeah, I mean, I could totally live with this computer. And as of right now, I feel like I could be fine with doing all of my day-to-day tasks for my job and my personal life. But I want to hear from you in the comments down below. What do you think about the 15-inch MacBook Air, the 13-inch MacBook Air with M3? Let me know down in those comments. And of course, also tell me which category of user you fall into and what your current workflow is, because I always love hearing that down in those comments. This has been Dan with MacRumors. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you around in the next video.